It started with a glance, barely noticeable, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention. But she noticed. The man at table 12 had been staring at her for longer than was polite, his eyes following her every move, yet never quite meeting hers directly. At first, she thought it was just another rich customer bored with his overpriced dinner and trying to find something more interesting than the wine list. This was, after all, a high-end bistro nestled in the heart of downtown, where powerful men came to eat in silence or argue over contracts with voices too calm to be called arguments. But this man wasn't like the others. He didn't order right away. He didn't scroll his phone. He didn't even seem to notice the waiter who brought him water. Instead, he sat still, shoulders square beneath a tailored charcoal coat, one hand resting gently on the table, fingers curled loosely as if holding on to something invisible. His face was sharp, the kind that looked like it had once known how to smile but had long since forgotten how. And every so often, he looked at her. She tried not to let it get to her. After all, she had work to do. Her name tag said Lily, but no one ever really used it. Customers usually just snapped their fingers or mumbled, "Miss," when they needed more bread. Lily was used to being invisible. She liked it that way, mostly. The restaurant was quiet that night. Rain tapped gently against the wide windows that framed the street like a painting in motion. Outside, the city glowed in a blur of amber lights and moving umbrellas. Inside, everything was warm, dim lighting, soft jazz humming through hidden speakers, clinking cutlery, murmured conversations. It should have felt peaceful. But something about that man unsettled her. She kept busy, clearing glasses, folding napkins, checking her section. Yet every time she passed his table, she felt it again, that heavy gaze, not intrusive but lingering, like someone flipping through a photo album in their head and struggling to remember where one image belonged. Eventually, she had to approach. "Would you like to start with something to drink?" she asked, her tone polite, practiced. He looked up at her then, really looked, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. Not recognition. Not desire. But grief. Familiar grief. The kind you wear quietly, like a jacket you never take off even when the sun's shining. "I'll have the Bordeaux," he said, his voice deep, deliberate. She nodded and turned to leave, but then she heard it. Whispered. Barely audible. "Lulu." Her footsteps stopped mid-step. She hadn't heard that name in over 20 years. No one called her that anymore. Not since the summers spent barefoot in the countryside, chasing dragonflies with scraped knees and a boy who swore he'd never forget her. The boy who left without saying goodbye. She turned slowly. He was still looking at her, but now there was something more in his expression, something fragile. Hope. Uncertainty. A memory trying to find its way home. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice quieter now. He looked startled, as if he hadn't meant to say it out loud. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "It's just, you reminded me of someone. Someone I used to know. A long time ago." She stared at him, her heart beating a little too fast. "Where did you hear that name?" He paused. "I haven't heard it in years. But when I saw you, something came back. A summer. A necklace. A girl with a dandelion crown and a laugh that made you believe in forever." Her knees nearly gave out. The kitchen bell dinged in the background. A waiter called her name. Someone waved for the check. But all of it faded into silence. She hadn't told anyone in this city that story. Not once. Not even when her ex asked why she cried every time she smelled lavender. Not when her landlord wondered about the old letter she kept in a glass frame above her bed. Not when her mother passed and she stood alone at the grave, remembering the only boy who ever made her feel seen. "I think you've mistaken me," she whispered. But her voice betrayed her. Shaky. Thin. He nodded slowly, but the look in his eyes said otherwise. "Maybe I have." She backed away, heart thudding. She needed air. She needed time. She needed a moment. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, something long buried had stirred. And Lily, the waitress who thought she had buried her past in forgotten nicknames and unanswered letters, suddenly felt 16 again, standing barefoot in a sunlit field, holding hands with a boy who once promised he'd write every day. That second visit came on a Wednesday. Emily had just finished wiping down the counter when the door chimed again, and there he was. The same man. He walked in like he owned every place he stepped into, but there was something softer in his eyes this time. He nodded at her, more of a silent greeting than anything formal, and chose the same corner booth, back to the window, hands folded. She approached with her notebook, pen ready, but her voice hesitated. "The usual?" she asked, surprising even herself. He gave a small smile. "You remembered." "I have a good memory," she replied, scribbling the order down. He studied her for a moment, the way one looks at a photo from long ago, familiar, but missing a name. That's a rare thing these days. Emily gave a small laugh and walked away before her hands betrayed her with a tremble. From behind the counter, she snuck glances. He didn't scroll on his phone or look out the window. He watched the people. The way they spoke, moved, laughed. As if absorbing something he'd been away from too long. Like someone who had once belonged and was trying to remember how it felt. That night, as she refilled his cup of coffee, he looked at her again, longer this time. "Has anyone ever told you?" he began, then paused, almost catching the words before they escaped. He shook his head. "Never mind." Emily blinked. "Told me what?" He looked away. "That you seem familiar." She shrugged, lips curving into a practiced smile. "I get that a lot. I guess I just have one of those faces." But inside, something stirred. An itch in her chest, a shadow of memory dancing just out of reach. She brushed it off. The man was probably just another rich guy who liked to play games with working-class women. Still, there was something in the way he said it. Like he meant it. Like he'd seen her before, not as a stranger, but as someone he had once truly known. Later that night, after the diner emptied out and the lights dimmed, she sat at the same booth he had occupied. Her fingers trailed the edge of the table. There, carved faintly into the wood, were two initials, E and J. She froze. Nobody ever sat there before him. It was the booth that had been ignored for years, tucked away in the corner, too dark, too lonely. But once, long ago, it had meant something. She remembered being 16, sneaking into this diner with a boy from the neighborhood. He always wore old jeans, and he'd save up his pocket money to buy her chocolate milkshakes. He'd once carved their initials there, laughing as she told him he'd get them both in trouble. "J," she whispered now, brushing the edge of the letters with her fingers. Could it be? She sat back, eyes wide, heart pounding. That boy, James, he had left without a word. One day he was there, next day, gone. His parents had taken him overseas, something about family disgrace, business problems, and then, nothing. She never heard from him again. Until now. But this man, could he really be that same boy? No. She shook her head, scolding herself. That was a lifetime ago. And that boy was nothing like this man, confident, wealthy, intimidating. James had been awkward, sweet, a little clumsy. Always writing poetry, always dreaming big. Still, her hand hovered over the carved initials one more time before she stood and turned out the lights. And that night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind whispered the same name over and over again. Jamie. The third time he came in, it was raining. Not the kind of rain that rushes or roars, but the soft, steady kind that makes people quiet, pensive. Emily was folding napkins behind the counter when she saw him through the window, standing outside, umbrella untouched, his hair damp, his coat dotted with raindrops. But he didn't look rushed. He looked like someone remembering something. When he stepped inside, the bell above the door chimed gently, but she didn't greet him this time. Not with words. She just looked at him, really looked. His face was older, stronger, sharper, but the eyes, those soft brown eyes, there was something achingly familiar in them. He sat down slowly at the same booth. And when she walked over, he didn't wait. "I need to ask you something," he said, his voice low but steady. "Have you ever been called Mookie?" The world stood still. Emily froze. Her heart stopped. That name. That silly little nickname. Only one person had ever called her that. She hadn't heard it in over 20 years. No one else even knew what it meant. It was a word born in childhood laughter, invented by a boy who once promised to never forget her. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Her hands gripped the edge of the menu she had been holding. "What did you say?" she whispered. "Mookie," he repeated, more gently this time. "You used to hate it. Said it made you sound like a cartoon character. But you let me call you that anyway." She stepped back, eyes wide, breath shallow. Her voice came out like a breath. "Jamie." He smiled, and in that second, the years melted. He wasn't the sharp-suited stranger anymore. He was the boy with grass stains on his jeans and dirt under his nails, who once swore he'd write her 100 letters if they were ever separated. "I tried to find you," he said. "But we moved the next morning. My father, there was a scandal. Everything happened so fast. I left behind my schoolbooks, my baseball glove, even my dog. But what I missed most was you." Emily sat down without asking. Her knees wouldn't hold her any longer. She stared at him, tears springing to her eyes. "I waited," she whispered. 4 weeks. Then months. I used to walk by your house, hoping to see a light on." Jamie looked down, ashamed. "I wrote dozens of letters. Maybe more. I gave them to my mother to send. I thought you'd gotten them and just moved on. I never got a single one," she said, voice cracking. "Not one." Silence fell between them, thick and heavy. Outside, the rain tapped softly against the window, like a soundtrack to memories long buried. After a long moment, Jamie reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out something small, worn, folded, frayed around the edges. A letter. He placed it on the table. "This one I never sent. I kept it. It was the first one I wrote. The night we left." Emily picked it up with trembling fingers, her eyes scanning the faded handwriting. She didn't read it aloud. She didn't need to. The tears in her eyes said everything. "I still remember your laugh," he said quietly. "The way you used to braid flowers into your hair. The way you'd hum when you were nervous. I remember you hated climbing trees," she said through a tearful smile. "But you always did it anyway because I dared you." They both laughed then, softly, brokenly. Like people exhaling after holding their breath for far too long. Jamie looked at her, his eyes shining. "I didn't think I'd find you again. But when I walked in that night and saw you behind the counter, something in me just stopped." Emily held the letter to her chest. "All this time, we were just a few blocks away." He nodded, solemn. "And maybe a few lifetimes too." She looked at him, and for the first time in years, the ache in her chest began to soften. "You came back," she said. He reached across the table, not to take her hand, but just to be near it. "I never really left," he said. "Just got lost along the way." And with that, two souls who had once whispered dreams beneath summer skies now sat across from each other again, older, weathered, but not broken. The rain outside still fell, but inside the diner, something else was beginning to grow. A warmth. A promise. Or maybe, just the start of something long overdue. It had been 2 weeks since that rainy evening, but something inside Emily had changed forever. Every time she wiped the same counter, refilled the same coffee cups, or swept the same floor, she felt like her hands carried more meaning, like her small life had collided with something much bigger, much older, and much more beautiful than she ever imagined. Jamie had come back every day since then. Not just as a customer. Sometimes he'd help her carry boxes from the back. Other times he'd just sit quietly at the end booth, watching her with eyes full of years lost. And in the moments between orders, they talked, softly, carefully, like people relearning a language they used to speak fluently. Emily found herself remembering things she thought she'd forgotten. Like the way Jamie used to draw cartoons in the margins of his notebooks. How he always added 1 star to the sky in his sketches, saying, "That one's for you." She had been that star once. And now, maybe, she was again. But healing didn't come easy. One night, after the last customer had left and the lights dimmed to a quiet amber, Emily stood behind the counter, hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug. Jamie approached, his coat slung over one shoulder. "I've been thinking," he said gently. She didn't look at him. Just nodded. "I never asked what happened to you. After I left." Emily's voice was calm, but there was weight behind it. "I stayed. Got older. Took care of my mom until she passed. Worked here ever since. It wasn't much, but it was honest." He stepped closer. "I should have found you sooner." "You tried," she said. "And I should have moved on. But I think a part of me was always waiting." Jamie placed something small on the counter. A key. It glinted in the light. "I bought the bookstore across town," he said. "I'm turning it into a reading cafe. Somewhere people can feel warm. Safe." She looked at the key, not daring to touch it. "I was wondering if you'd want to help me run it," he continued. "Not because I pity you, or because I'm trying to fix the past. But because you always wanted a place filled with stories." Emily smiled softly. "You remembered." "I never forgot," he whispered. Her eyes brimmed with tears again. But they were different this time. Lighter. Softer. Like rain after a long drought. "I don't need saving, Jamie." "I know," he said. "But maybe we could save something together." And in that moment, there was no need for apologies. No need to rewrite the past. Just 2 people, finally ready to write a new chapter, on their own terms. That night, as Jamie walked her home under the soft glow of the street lamps, she slipped her hand into his, not with hesitation, but with quiet certainty. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. At the corner near her apartment, she paused and turned to him. "Do you still draw stars?" He smiled. "Only for you." She laughed through her tears. "Then don't stop." The next morning, the diner felt different. Brighter. Jamie wasn't just another face at table 7. He was someone who had once been part of her story, and now, maybe, was part of her future. As she poured coffee into a cup, a customer looked up and asked, "You seem lighter today." She smiled. "Maybe I am." In the window, the morning sun spilled golden light across the floor. Outside, the bookstore sign was being painted. And for the first time in a long time, Emily let herself believe that some stories really do come full circle. That some lost nicknames can still find their way home.